everyone, this is Kelly, and I just wanted to do a little video. I was going to do it on a specific topic, but then I wanted to kind of really go a little bit broader into what got me here. So I want to talk about some lessons that I have really learned in doing ancestor readings for myself, but also for clients as well. I do a lot of ancestor readings. I have a sort of longer form ancestor reading, and I have a listen and do ancestor reading, which I'll talk about in a second, because that's really based off of what most of my personal readings are in the last couple years for myself. So I actually do quite a bit of ancestral readings for others as well as for myself for the last few years. And I've definitely learned some lessons that I think have been important and have broadened the way that I read, that I have, just kind of looking back on it, found to be powerful. Now, I would say the main lesson that I've learned, that I was initially just going to do this video about, but I thought, well, let's talk about how I really got there. And this is something that I always knew, but I didn't practice as much. And that is the art of the open question, right? I do think, as somebody who teaches divination, of all different forms of divination, one of the things that I do teach a lot is the fact that it's important to know what your question is, right? It's important to understand your question, to frame your question well, and to be clear about that, both for yourself and for the purposes of the reading. Not just because whatever you may see, however you might see readings work, and whatever is answering that back, whether that's your own intuition, whether that's your guides, whether that's your ancestors, whether that's the universe, whatever that looks like to you, so that they answer the question that you're actually asking, but also for interpretation. If you are, what we are, I believe, are interpreters, right? When we're doing card readings, what we are doing is interpreting the card, and we interpret that card through different lenses, through the lens of the position that we've put it in, through the lens of the question that we've asked, through the lens of the card itself, and so on and so forth, right? We're interpreting a random set of cards in a specific circumstances through different parameters. And so in order, not just so that the whatever we are asking the question of can answer the question that we're really asking, but for the purposes of accurate interpretation, we have to know, what are we reading these cards through the lens of a work situation? Are we reading these cards through the lens of a romantic situation? Are we reading these cards through a self-improvement situation? What's the situation, so that we can interpret these cards through those lenses? So the question is very important. And some divination systems, the question is even more important than others, just in terms of interpretation methods and skill sets needed. And so we do talk a lot about the question. We talk about asking precise questions. We talk about understanding what our focus is going into a reading. And those are all very important questions, or very important things to think about in regards to a question, so that you get a clean interpretation, you get a clean answer from the cards. But I have always loved general readings, and I know that not everybody does. I have certainly seen over the years, even readers, professional readers, or be like, oh, give me a focus, right? Because it's easier to interpret. It's more precise. The more details that you put into a reading, the more details that you're able to get out of the reading. And so it is certainly easier in some ways to interpret a very focused reading than it is a broad, it could be saying anything kind of reading. So I understand, but I've always loved general readings, because I did Celtic Cross spreads for probably 9.5 years with tarot. And I had another spread that I did with an OM readings, and a different spread I think that I used with the Brian Froud oracle that I had. But for tarot readings, I did Celtic crosses. I truthfully think that's pretty much how I felt like that was how you read tarot. You read a Celtic cross. Because I had very few, I literally just had a guidebook that had a Celtic cross in it. It probably had other spreads. I don't have that deck with me to look at the guidebook, but for whatever reason, I got fixated on the Celtic cross. I would change up the positions, tweaking it to be more accurate to what I wanted to get out of the reading. But for pretty much for 9.5 years, it was a lot of Celtic cross spreads. And that's a big general reading that allows you to get some general information, allows you to get some specific information. And so I'm a big fan of general readings. I think general check-ins, what's going on energetically. I'm also wanting to pay attention to this specific area. I love those. I think that they're great. They're helpful, I think, in general. And I also just enjoy doing them as readings and sort of getting a scope, get an idea where we're at, getting an idea where things are headed, getting an idea in the major areas of where, what information that I want to get. I enjoy general reading. So in some ways, that's a reading without a question, although it does still have the question of what do I need to be aware of right now? Or there's always a question. So even what I'm going to talk about as being my biggest lesson from ancestor readings still has an inherent question involved, but it's not very specific. I guess I'm talking about an open-ended reading. So anyways, my rambling as per usual point is that I do think that questions and framing questions, understanding what it is you're really asking of sitting down to the table, what are you really there for? And when I teach two parts, and I'm not going to obviously go into this in depth. I'm thinking about this because my next class that I'm teaching, we're going to be talking about the question. But I actually think it's twofold. I think we have to come first to an understanding of what our intentions are in the reading. What our intentions are. Our intentions here to get support, our intentions to get information, is our intentions here to get a bit called to the carpet, like what are our intentions here? And then we can frame the question better when we know what we're really trying to get out of the question, right? So those are important. And so, but here's the thing. We tend to be, again, especially if we're looking for a specific question, it really hones and focuses the reading in. So if I'm asking the question of the cards, should or shouldn't I, well, it's a yes and no. Let me try to do a yes and no because that gets even more focused, obviously, than a general question. What can I get out of taking this particular job that's in front of me? I might have an option to get a job. What could I get out of this? Like, what is this? What am I going to get if I take this job? And so we might find out that, you're going to get a lot of great interactions with people, but the money's not going to be that great. Or you might get, financial reward, your resources improving and so on and such, but there could be some complications in the people and the stress level that you're under, right? So we're going to get this specific answer back. The issue is that we tend to then, every reading that we sit at the table, we're really just getting the answer to what we think is the most important question at the time. And so to sometimes work in broad open questions that just literally say, what do I need to hear right now? What should I be thinking about? What should I be sitting with right now? And leaving that wide open for the universe or your ancestors. I'm going to use the example of my ancestors because those are the types of, that's the situation that I utilize them in the most. Gives us the understanding that we don't always know the right question, and there may be something else that we should be thinking about besides this particular work situation or whatever's going on, that we might need to be thinking about something else. And if we never leave the space open, we're never going to get those messages, especially if we are the type of people who really just get our messages from the cards. If you haven't really broadened and opened yourself up to paying attention to getting the messages from the world around you, or you don't get them from dreams, or you don't have do journey work in your dreams, or other things in which other messages can come forward, or that you're hearing them. If the cards especially are the only place that you tend to get your messages from spirit or ancestors or guides or guardians or your own inner knowings, if you are that's how you get most of your messages, and you never create space to get the messages that you just need to be hearing, even if it's not about what you think is important, I think is really important. For me, this really came about, I was definitely, I was always, again, always did general readings, especially at full moons and things like that. I was always a fan, again, of a general reading, but when I started working consistently in ancestor readings, which would have been, I did ancestor readings long before this, but at the beginning of 2020, I started to get very focused about that. I created a very specific ancestral space that wasn't kind of blended in with my healing space at the time. I had a set up an altar space that I could sit on the floor and work with ancestors very specifically for long periods, because I could be sitting down. My other one was kind of up a shelf, and again, it was where I would also light candles for others, so it was kind of dual purpose. And so at the beginning of 2020, I set up a very specific ancestral space that I could sit cross-legged in front of it comfortably. And from that point on, so for me, for the last 3 years, my personal readings have primarily been in ancestor space, or to open and conversation with my ancestors. Now, this doesn't mean that I don't throw some quick cards down now and again, but for the vast majority of my personal readings, they have been ancestor readings. And so, and again, in my professional reading, I do a lot of ancestor readings. That is a popular reading, or the two that I have are, I think I actually have 3, but 2 of them are quite popular, and I do them a lot for other people. It's one of my favorite things to do, that and past life readings, because both of them, I'm very honored to go into that liminal space with people. And because I get so much from it, it's such a joy to be able to do that for other people. But my point is most of those, sometimes clients do come with a broad focus. They're feeling stuck and they just want some information from their ancestors. Or somebody had an amazing question that was asking about their ancestors' relationship with romantic relationships, as they were working through their own things and kind of opening up the floor for input from their ancestors about their and it was very fascinating. I absolutely love that. So there are times in which the ancestor readings are focused, but the majority of the time they stay open to what is it that your ancestors think you should hear right now. Because I find in my own experience with working with my ancestors and other people's ancestors that they often have a longer view, right? They're, especially the old primal ancestors who've been watching generation after generation, they've got longevity focuses versus very specific. They're like, you deal with work, you deal with XYZ, but I'm like looking at you're kind of needing to adjust your overall life path here a little bit, right? There's some things that you really need to dive into and do some work on that. Fine, deal with XYZ. Again, not that they're not interested in our day-to-day things, but I do find that when you open it up, they're much more interested in sort of that path to becoming the best version of ourselves and healing both backwards and forwards, obviously the ancestral line, because that's kind of their concern. Anyways, I think I'm, again, digressing. But okay, I lost my train of thought there. My point is that consistently going to the table for myself and for other people with just an open-ended, what do I need to hear right now? Like, what should I be working on? What am I supposed to be doing right now? And that's a pretty focused question. I don't generally go there, but just sort of, what do I need to hear? I guess would be the broadest stroke if I had to form it into a question, because again, I think every time you put cards to the table, there is an inherent question there, even if it's very broad stroked. There has been such a beauty that I have found in just allowing that open space. I believe, this is my view of the world, right? I believe that we are all connected. Everything is connected on a giant energetic web. I truly believe that the way that the world and energy works is very web-based. Everything is connected. Time and distance, to me, is not overly linear or overly important in terms of energetic work and reading work. I believe that I can give energy and aid and healing to my ancestors just as much as they can give support and advice and things to me as well. And if we believe that everything is interconnected, sometimes just kind of letting go as we're trying to sort of manipulate the web, and we're trying to change things, and we're trying to manifest things into our life, and we're doing all of these things, to sometimes just let go of the tools for a minute, let go of the strings and all the things that you're juggling energetically wise, and to sort of hands off and just say, I'm listening, and just listen it's a very powerful experience, especially if you have a consistent opportunity for those things, for that space to just listen, right? It's like if you believe in prayer, right? If you're somebody that does pray to a deity, whatever that might be. And if you're constantly praying and praying and praying and praying and praying and praying and praying, but you never stop talking, or you never stop speaking long enough to hear any answer, you might be missing an important answer, right? That's kind of how I feel energetically, that if we're just constantly doing and trying to sort things out and analyzing, but we never just stop and see what's actually coming back, I think we miss a lot. We still get, a lot of answers to specific questions, but we miss some of those broader messages if we aren't quiet enough, if we don't have enough of a space to be able to hear what other messages that might be coming through. I know this is a very, as per me, long ramble to say a very short thing, which is that my experience in the last 3 years of most of my personal readings being relatively open-ended readings to my ancestors, I've just really learned the value of just being willing to listen and not come to the reading with an agenda other than to listen. That there's a lot of value there, and I've had a lot of hard work. Like, it's not always fun things that come back. It's not always easy things. My ancestors, I don't know about your ancestors, but my ancestors and the universe in general, I believe, does expect us to be doing the work. They expect us to be thinking the hard things and sitting with the hard messages. And so to me, this isn't always easiness, but it's always supportive. And I think maybe that's another part of the lesson that I've learned in having this. Your equivalent to an ancestor reading might be a reading to your guides, a consistent practice with listening to your guides, or a consistent practice of animal guardian, to speak, having messages from your animal guardians, or to a deity, or again dropping into the collective unconscious, whatever that looks like to you. That is that space in which you're going to gain supportive messages. So the intention for me going into an ancestor reading is always supportive. I am always interpreting the cards through that supportive lens, because I know that the ancestors, especially that I have cultivated a conversation with, are there to be supportive. That, again, that doesn't always mean nice nice is relative. That's a subjective word, I guess. Not always easy. In fact, my main, I would say the main like specific ancestor that I have developed a conversation with is not anybody that I would can call nice or easy, but always supportive and always with my best interest. So I'm always interpreting the cards through my best interest, but that doesn't mean it's easy energy. And I would say that would be the same for anybody, whether they are going forward to tap into their highest self. I would hope that the purpose would be to not always be easy, but to always be supportive. Same thing with a guide, same thing with a deity, right, that you might be working with. So I've got cards on the table because I figured who wants, again, to just spend this much time, but then I've just rambled on. These are some decks that I have up here just to give some examples, but I want to start with, we'll come back over here. My main, what I have, and some of this was born about because because of the space that I have. So again, I created an ancestor space for myself. I can sit cross-legged in front of it. It is kind of squarish shape, but there's stuff all in it. So I have kind of this, more deep than wide space to do readings in. So I do think some of that. Some of the reading that I have just developed, and being primarily a reading that I do for myself, developed because of that space, but it works. So I have a further pack space that has an animal fur there, and it's kind of hemmed in by two things, so it almost creates a box shape back there. And so it's really great for casting. So I do cast runes. I have a very, very special to me set of runes on my ancestor space from a dear friend. And they are, just buzzy, good runes. And it's only really been, I say they've only been used in ancestor space. And so I can cast there. I have a set of bones that I use for ancestor readings that I cast there because it's got a nice shape. Or sometimes that's a space that I will put up some oracles, or I'll utilize an oracle. I have several that I use often in that space. What I have with me, I've got the to show you is this is the Faceted Garden. I often use the Urban Crow Oracle. I have a couple at home that I often use. I have a thing on Ancestor decks. But I try to use a deck that has an Ancestor card in it, or I find one and make it an Ancestor card. So this deck doesn't have a specific Ancestor card, but I use the Mycelium card as that connective energy that's there for supportive resources and things. It makes sense, right? So whatever the deck that I'm using, I generally find what is going to be. The Book of the Dead by Scylla Conway, I use this a lot in Ancestor Space, both for myself and for clients in the Listen and Do reading especially. But in that reading, because that came out of how I read for myself with my ancestors, I always use a deck that I can pick an ancestor card. So with the Mycelium run, right? So I'm going to shuffle. Again, I've usually lit candles. I have salts that I've made that I might sprinkle as an offering. Just a Heidi Ho hello. Just kind of, generally it's just a comfortable. It's a very, when you go, several times a week, and you're just consistently sitting in space like that, it becomes a comfortable space, right? To just sit and say, I'm going to bring a cup of tea. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to, sit here. Or I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling heavy. I just want to sit here for comfort, for support. It's just a good space that energetically you're getting into. So I'm just shuffling. And then I turn it over and I find, again, obviously this is just showing you, but I find the Ancestor card and I pull the card on either side. Or if it's a larger deck, sometimes I'll just pull one card. Like if I'm going to pull a grandmother card, I'm just pulling one. I never pull more than one grandmother card, right? So I'm just going to pull that one grandmother card. But it's generally oracle or casting based. and I'm generally just, there's no question on the table. It really has developed into feeling very much like just, sit with this and listen to this. So I have the ram here, and it's interesting with the ram and the lotus. Lotus is a really important symbol to me. It's an understanding of balance. It's an understanding that we need both the hard things and the muck and the mire and under the water, and we need the sun and the beauty. We need all of those things come together to make like the fullness of who we need to be and who we need to become. But we have that with the ram, which just looking at this image, right? The ram seems very determined, very persevering, very sure-footed, I know it's connected with Aries, and in this image you see a lot of fiery, so you feel very active, do this, persevere, move forward, energy. But that movement is all directed at understanding the fullness of a life that has both hard things and mucky things and muddiness, as well as the bright sunlight. And then a lot of the life is spent, going back and forth between those two things. Again, this is not a real reading, but so I'm just going to sit with that. I'm really not trying to... sometimes, it will apply to something directly, like, okay, yeah, I need to stop moping around and sort of, so there could be certain things that it will instantly apply to, but for the most part, it's just sort of, okay, that's interesting. I'm going to sit and think about these concepts. I'm going to take that walk away with that and probably think about it for the rest of the day. Or, as I go to sleep, if I've done the reading at night. I really don't feel the need to directly do anything about it immediately. It's just to think about and to sit with. And there's something beautiful about that energy of, okay, I'm just going to sit with this. Maybe I'm going to have to do something about it down the road, but right now I'm going to sit with this. This is something I needed to hear for whatever reason, and I'm gonna sit with that. So that's generally, I do that first. It's again further back generally, and so I pop that in, and then well, I'll actually use the deck that I use a lot here, which is Vision Quest Tarot. Then I pull 3 tarot cards. So that's always Oracle, runes, bones, generally those 3 things, Oracle, runes, or bones. And, get that message, sit as long as I need, contemplate, drink some tea or coffee right now, since I can't drink much tea anymore, but coffee, just kind of sit with it. I'm not in any big rush there. And then I generally pull 3 tarot cards, and this is always much more active oriented. Now, in my own personal practice, this has nothing to do with your ancestors or anybody else's ancestors, but in my own personal practice, this farther space with the bones and the runes and the oracle tends to be very specific to a maternal, I don't want to say maternal because that sounds like that's from my mother's line, but a female line coming through that I have actively worked with, especially my main ancestral guardian. And so it feels very feminine. Again, not easy or soft or squishy, but it feels like my actual female ancestors. That's just my own personal practice. Whereas I seem to have quite a lot, and again, this could be personal, because I actually do have a grandfather energy that comes through up there as well. So it's not specifically, but there's a much more masculine vibe to my tarot, bottom part tarot readings that are action oriented. And that can be because of my particular ancestors. You might have, female ancestors coming forward with that snap, snap, snap. And I certainly have those as well, but it just feels different. So with the tarot cards that I pull 3 tarot cards, and Generally, I'm kind of when I don't have positions, I'm focusing on the middle card as sort of the main message and the other two, but sometimes I'm just forming a sentence there. I'm really not trying to be super specific here. So I might have the daughter of water, which is learning, that spark with ace of water. So both of these are about, for me, my inner power, my emotional landscape, but below that is my inner power base, right? And really continuing to learn and play, but also to sort of spark something that is going to have this strong potential of growth towards this inner peace. But what is different for me in this bottom is that this is a call for me to do something. So that's why I actually call this a listen and do, because that's how my ancestor readings tend to be. Sit with this. You might do something with this later, but right now, not so much. Do something about this. We're not just going to think about how to spark or learn some other way to approach these things. We're not just thinking about the potential. We're actually doing something that is going to actively move me to opening. The two of air is about bringing the head and the heart together so that you can have that movement forward. So this is coming to some sort of resolution that is going to actively move me forward. It's not just thinking about it. It's time to actually do something about that. And oftentimes this bottom part can seem very specific to situations that I do need to do something about, and it makes much more, it's much more about this is a situation that you need to do something about, and so that pops forward as being very active. It's time to take some action on this specifically. So that, again, this I didn't do this purposefully. It just came over, but none of this was me saying, I've got this particular situation, what should I do about it? It just kind of crops up and I'm like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. And yes, I'll do something about it. That kind of thing, more so than I don't very often come with that specific question about a specific situation. Again, it's not that I never do specific question. I do that. That's generally for me cartomancy. That's usually my oracle place. That's usually a playing card deck or Nellie's deck. Much more cartomancy and base when I'm really just trying to get a quick answer to a quick situation. That's more for me cartomancy base. But oracle and tarot, for my own personal practice, this is generally what it looks like, and it's generally an ancestor space, and it's generally not focused on anything. And I find this, again, the whole rambling point of this are the lessons that I've learned. And I've just learned that lesson, that it is good to not always have a question. Again, I think you need an intention. You need an intention to come to the cards and gain support and pull a card and say, okay, here's Heron, right? I would then read in this deck, I would read the story of Heron and see what is I'm supposed to sit with. And this is deep energy, and I will generally sit with a grandmother card for about a month. I don't time it, but it generally and naturally tends to work out to being about a month, and then I'll take it off of the feel like that I've taken the message that I need out of that. But grandmother, I would only pull that card once, and it would sit there, and I would sit with that, read the message. If it was something like, just a single, okay, I need to really sit and contemplate with change. What does change mean to me? Why am I comfortable with change? Am I not comfortable with change? Do I need to get more comfortable? Just really sitting with it and contemplating it. If it's, again, an oracle card. Sometimes I'll do a combination where, like I showed in another video, I might pull an oracle card, and it's still a bit of that, okay, well, in this case, this deck I found is great for what should I embody right now. And so, because it's archetypes of, so here we have the sage, so I need to embody and be the sage myself in some way. So I'm just trying to get random cards by pulling these, but then I'm going to think, about it with the 10 and the 6 of nails, right? To come to this, utilize all of the knowledge that I've gained through all of my experiences, good, bad, and in between, and utilize that and have the wisdom to be able to navigate my way forward. So it kind of, this kind of layout here that I sometimes do embodies the same listen and do, but it just kind of coalesces in a different way. But it still has that, what should I sit with, or what energy should I sit in, and then what should I actively be doing with that as well. So it kind of ends up, all of my personal readings end up being similar to this, but there's not really a message. I utilize this also with my Oracle of Place, just because, again, this is one that I utilize a lot for myself in readings. Let me pull out the, I have the animals and plants right on top, but let me pull that out so I have it. My Oracle Place, I have a very specific reading that I use with it. Shuffle, 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 split how I'm going to split. This is where I'm at right now. So it does kind of ground me in whatever is going on right now that I need to be aware of. Where am I heading towards? And then the third card has me saying, okay, what's going to help me get there, or what's going to help me avoid going there if I don't want to go there. And then I have the last card that says, okay, I need to really root myself. I really need to reground myself, go so on and so forth, right? So I'm kind of in a sticky situation right now, although this bog is a very protective card for me. It's a protective landscape. It's a place that you can kind of safely hide out. But I might be heading towards the monster. I might be heading towards some shadow aspects of self. I might be abdicating responsibility as I move forward, and I don't want to do that. So I need to really center myself into the physical world, literally put my feet in the ground or on the ground, so on and so forth. Obviously, it's not a reading, but that is something that I will often do for myself. And then if, again, I have a very specific situation, it's generally a 6-card playing card reading, or Nellie's deck, which is a combo fortune telling, playing cards, tarot, but I read it very playing card style, 6-card, and that's what I use for more very specific questions. How do I deal with X, Y, and Z? But the vast majority of my readings, again, are ancestor. And even in my full ancestor reading that I do for myself as well, but I generally do it every so often. So for me, it's generally, okay, there's going to be a moon eclipse, or there's just something energetically, or I'm just really having a rough time of it and I need sort of a full session of sitting down and really thinking through and hearing things. Then I'm kind of pulling for an overall theme. What's going on in terms of my emotional intelligence with the vampire card. The vampire card actually came up in a reading for a client in this position. That was very fascinating, right? Because it really talks about sustenance. Vampires also are about transference of energy and the shift in energy, and lifeblood, and what is the lifeblood of what's going on, and are you utilizing that, so on and so forth, right? So you're pulling a card from an oracle deck, whether that's a grandmother card, whether that's another oracle card, just to get an overall theme. And then because of, my ancestors expect me to do the work, I pull a card for what I'm supposed to be doing, ancestor that is stepping forward specifically to aid me in what I'm supposed to be doing. And then I kind of open up the table for 3 other ancestors to come forward with any messages that they want. So it's got a theme, but it's an open-ended theme of what should I be thinking about and working with right now, and actively working with, and hearing and actively working with, but it stays open. And then it really opens up the table below to say, okay, if anybody else has something they need to say to me, have at it. I'm listening. And that's the key here of all this ramble. The key here is that I'm listening, right? That I am going to not just do this reading to get a specific answer to a question, but I'm listening. I'm putting myself in a position to just hear what I need to hear in some capacity. And whether that's a bit of a calling to the carpet, whether that's a little bit of a poke and a kick in the butt to get going and to get active on something, whether that is some healing that I am neglecting and ignoring that might need to set with, and whether that sometimes it's just a big old hug and say, you've got this, you're fabulous, we love you. Any of those things could come through, but the fact of the matter is I'm just listening. And I just think there's a lot of power I've learned, and it doesn't have to just be, again, in an ancestor reading, but I've learned that there is power in putting yourself in a supportive space and then just opening yourself up to listen and to hear what needs to be heard. Because again, if we are only ever asking specific questions, we never leave ourselves space to just hear the other things that we might not realize are important for us to hear. So I know that was a bit of a ramble around ancestor readings and that, but I hope that it gives you something to think about. If you are more of a focused reader and more somebody who does ask specific questions, it's important, right? Asking specific questions, very important. Getting the answers to questions that we need answered, it's an important part of reading. It is also important to learn how to do divination, whatever the system you're learning, to have very specific questions so that you can interpret the cards through the lens of those questions. So I'm a big fan of knowing what you're coming to the table for, having a specific question that you are able to interpret the cards through. It's an important skill set, but it shouldn't be our only skill set. And that if we are only ever talking, asking, talking, analyzing, and we never just have that still quiet space to just hear the message that we just need to hear in that moment, I think we miss out on important and powerful introspective moments. And that's what I have learned, solidly learned, I suppose I could say, through just the natural shifting of my personal readings because of most of them being done in ancestor space. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day, whatever that is when you're watching this. And I hope that you give yourself an opportunity to just hear what the universe or your guides or your ancestors or your guardians feel that is helpful for you to hear.